All right. Since this event is part of the Nature of Writing series in partnership with the North Cascades Institute, I'd like to invite Kim Nelson to say a few words. Kim is the marketing and executive assistant for North Cascades Institute, and she has worked for the Institute for 1.5 years. Before that, she worked as a naturalist, ornithologist, and park ranger. She also currently serves on the board of Skagit Audubon Society as the chair of youth education. Welcome, Kim.
Holly, can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Before I get started, I want to first acknowledge the Coast Salish people who have stewarded the land where I am standing since time immemorial. Since I'm in Anacortes, I want to personally acknowledge the Swinomish Indian tribal community, as well as the Samish Indian Nation. I offer this acknowledgement as a first step in honoring the relationship with the land that we share, as well as a call towards further learning and action in support of our Indigenous neighbors. Thank you. As Tichali mentioned, I'm here today representing North Cascades Institute. If you're not already familiar with our organization, we are a conservation and nonprofit, and our mission is to inspire environmental stewardship through transformative learning experiences in nature. Accordingly, we offer programs for people of all ages and backgrounds to explore and engage with nature in the hopes that they'll one day go on to protect these wild and sacred places. North Cascades Institute offers many different programs, including Mountain School, a 3-day overnight environmental education experience for 5th grade students. And we are currently enrolling for our Youth Leadership Adventures program, which consists of multi-day backcountry trips for high school students, focusing on climate change solutions and building leadership skills. Additionally, we offer a diverse suite of adult and family programs, which includes field excursions, family camps, art and writing retreats, online classes, and even boat tours. Most of our programs typically take place at the North Cascades Environmental Learning Center on the beautiful wooded shoreline of Diablo Lake in the heart of North Cascades National Park. We just recently reopened our facility to the public, so if you haven't been before or if it's been a while, now is the perfect time to plan a visit. I also want to give a big plug for upcoming online classes and field excursions. We'll be covering topics such as nature photography, plants, birds, painting, geology, history, lichens, even wildlife tracking. You can find out all about these programs by visiting our website at incascades.org. That's the letter N as in North, cascades.org. And you can also be the first to find out about our upcoming programs and events by signing up for our online newsletter, and I'll be sure to drop those links in the chat momentarily. As Tichali mentioned, tonight's reading is a part of our Nature of Writing speaker series that happens every spring and fall. We have 2 more upcoming events that you'll definitely want to sign up for. Next Thursday, May 13th, we will have North Cascades Institute's very own founder, author, and soon-to-be retiring executive director, Saul Weisberg, as well as notable authors William Dietrich and John Miles. It's sure to be a fun evening in which they'll be discussing North Cascades history, as well as their personal experiences with nature writing. And the following Thursday, May 20th, we will have the legendary author and lepidopterist Robert Michael Pyle discussing his newest book of essays, Nature Matrix. More information about these events can be found once again by visiting our website at incascades.org. And so I have to say that I am very excited for tonight's speaker, Lyanda Lynn Haupt. The Institute considers her a friend, and we posted her several times over the years. She is an award-winning author, naturalist, eco-philosopher, and speaker whose writings are at the forefront of the movement to connect people to nature. Her latest book, which I am really excited to read, I haven't read it yet, but I'm really excited about, is called Rooted: Life at the Crossroads of Science, Nature, and Spirit. Her previous books include Mozart's Darling, The Urban Bestiary, Crow Planet, Pilgrim on the Great Bird Continent, and Rare Encounters with Ordinary Birds, which is my personal favorite. Lyanda has also created and directed educational programs for Seattle Audubon. She's worked in raptor rehabilitation and has even been a seabird researcher for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in the remote tropical Pacific, which I think is very cool. She lives in Seattle with her husband and daughter, as well as a mixed flock of backyard chickens and a starling named Carmen. Lyanda is joined tonight by North Cascades Institute's very own Christian Martin. He has served as the marketing communications manager for 15 years, and he's also my supervisor, and he's just an awesome guy overall. Christian and Lyanda have known each other for even longer than 15 years, so I'm very much looking forward to their conversation tonight. So please welcome them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. So happy to be here with you, Lyanda.
You too.
It's an exciting couple of days because this book just dropped
Yesterday.
yesterday.
Yes.
So this book is 1 day old.
Yay.
Out in the world. So it's so exciting to be here. And like Kim mentioned in the lovely intro, Lyanda and I actually, I did the math on my way over here. We met in 1992.
I don't know if we should even do the math, actually.
So we're
Let's just say
longtime
we're
friends. And
old
it's so heartening to be here with you.
Yeah.
We're sitting here in the Chuckanut Creek watershed, just outside of Bellingham. So I wanted to be outdoors because that's appropriate for this book. So a lovely setting, and thanks to everyone in the audience out there. We can't see anybody, which is sad. So hope there's lots of friends and co-workers and maybe some old Blue Planeteers.
I bet there's some out there.
Yeah.
We met at a really secret cultish restaurant in Seattle, vegan cafe called the Blue Planet that I helped start, and Christian was early. It's
Master Juicer.
Yep.
Yeah.
We could talk about that all night. We
That's
got to be
its
careful.
own
We got to be
podcast.
careful.
We want to talk about Rooted. I'm really honored to be asked by Lyanda to help introduce this book to everyone, and we'll start where it all starts, which is this book is just came out, but I know you've been working on it for a long time. And so could you share with us the kernel of inspiration from, or the seed that this book grew out of?
Sure. It's hard to identify that exactly. But I do want to say one thing first. Here we are together, and yet we're on Zoom. We're doing it this weird way because we are still in a pandemic. Both Christian and I are vaccinated, and we're outdoors, and we're not cuddling.
Mhm.
So we're feeling that we're in the safety guidelines. So we wanted to acknowledge that we're being safe. And I wanted to mention too, Kim offered a land acknowledgement, and I live and work in Seattle, the unceded lands of the Duwamish people, and honor that land and the people that have lived there from time immemorial. So where did this book start? I mean, I think that's a really hard question because there's no one moment where you know something that you're thinking about is going to become a book. But I was visiting my daughter who goes to school on the East Coast, and that's also my chance to get together with my editor at Little Brown, Tracy Bihar. He's wonderful. And we were talking, she said, do you have an idea for another book? And I said, you know, I don't know if I do, but I've been thinking a lot about this ultra trend of a couple of years back, forest bathing.
Mhm.
And all of this science was coming out, and it was huge news in the media that there was now evidence-based research that our physiological cells, our prefrontal cortex, our balance of hemoglobin, our parasympathetic nervous system, all of these things function better when we spend time in nature. I kind of thought to myself, why is it bothering me that everyone's so excited about this? Because
Mhm.
I couldn't put my finger on it. It was just one of those things, and I had to ponder it and turn it over in my head. And I thought, you know, we already knew this. We already knew this. Mystics across times and cultures and traditions, poets, artists, indigenous earth-based cultures have always proclaimed our at-homeness and our interconnection with the natural world. And this is funny. Let me see if I have this. My father-in-law sent me this postcard a couple of days ago, and it has a quote by Samuel Johnson: "Curiosity after the works of nature demonstrably multiplies the inlets to happiness." 1700 years, or 1700s, when we did not have evidence-based research. So I thought, it's beautiful science. It tells us things about the specificity of the way nature connection works that we didn't know. But I really wanted to acknowledge, I want to invite us to honor our innate knowing of that connection to the natural world. And so that was the kernel that led me to this book.
What you're describing now is speaking towards this really awesome subtitle, I think. The book is Rooted, of course, but the subtitle, Life at the Crossroads of Science, Nature, and Spirit. And I feel like you're starting to talk about that in your answer at the kernel, but can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah.
Crossroads of Science, Nature, and Spirit.
So this is funny. I always struggle with subtitles for my books. And for Mozart's Starling, I argued to just not have a subtitle, and my publisher freaked out. It's a nonfiction book, we have to have a subtitle. And my friends who are writers said, how did you get away with not having a subtitle? So subtitles are really hard, I think, but the title of this book, coming around here, question about subtitles, the roundabout way.
Yeah.
The title of this book, the working title, the whole time I was working on it was Frog Church, until the very last minute, where my publisher finally just said, okay, it's just too weird. We can't call it that. And so we changed the name to
Frog
Rooted.
Church.
Frog Church. Which I thought it was kind of funky and fun, but they're probably right. But I have to say that for the first time in writing any book, I had the subtitle right from the start, and I didn't waver from it. I fiddled with, should it be intersection or crossroads, but that's it. And the reason is kind of what we were talking about. There's all of this science about nature that is, I don't want to say validating or legitimizing, but I want to say affirming knowledge that is all innate knowledge, or awareness that we have access to, whether or not we have the science, we have access to a sense of interconnection with the natural world and the significance of that. And so, and yet the science is also beautiful. I don't want to say that, oh, we don't need the science, or, oh, we need the science to legitimize anything. I just wanted to work on that really powerful intersection. And I had this whole scheme. It was really funny. I had a diagram that was my kind of my guide, a triquetra, difficult word to say, but beautiful word, a Venn diagram of 3 different circles that overlap in the middle to form this curved angled triangle called the Rouleau's triangle. And I got really obsessed with that. That was the area for me where science, nature, and spirit overlapped. And that was going to be my focus. But the more I worked on it, the more I realized, and the more I researched, and the more I wrote into it, I realized that I couldn't separate those circles. I couldn't pull them apart like that. So that overlap was much bigger than that triangle. It was more like there were 3 overlapping circles, like pancakes. And then when I came up with the pancakes, that didn't even work because they were parallel to one another. So it was like 3 pancakes that were smushed all together. So there was just no way to pull those apart. And so I think it's a beautiful intersection of subjects that belong together essentially.
That's very interesting. I could ask, we could just talk about, I think that one topic for a long time, but I was going to ask you also about how that relates to the main title. I have a question about Rooted, and then maybe you could do a reading from the book. Is rooted, I love that word, and like in the context of your book here, is it a verb? Is it a mindset? Is it a practice, a spiritual practice? In your, I mean, it could be any of those, but in your intention of naming your book Rooted, is it like a physical practice or something in the mind or something else?
Well, what I love about the word is that it is all of those things that you said. So we could play with it in all of those different ways. And so I think you already answered the question, that word captures so many things. It means it's from the word radix, which means the central axis about which things spin.
Mhm.
It is related to the word radical, which is, most essential, most significant forms of engagement and action. And so I love all of those things about this word. That said, once we gave up Frog Church, it was really hard to come up with something. And it was scrolling through my photo feed that I thought over and over again, I saw these pictures of roots. And I even found an Instagram post that I made where I just showed some roots on a hike not far from here. And the caption was just rooted. Long, a year before we came up with that. And it just hit me. I just thought, oh, that's the title.
Nice.
And I was shocked to look at it. I thought that there would be a million books. It seemed like such an obvious title that I was certain that it was taken, but it wasn't. And so there we are.
Well, let's not stop talking about the book for a moment and hear the poetry and music within the pages.
All
the little
right.
reading.
Do you want me to read, because I'm mindful of our time, do you want me to go to the forest bathing part to tie in with what I was just
sure.
talking about and skip the wolf part from the beginning?
Sure.
I think we should do that.
Sure.
Okay.
Time goes faster than we always wanted to. We're good.
Yeah,
I'm watching.
Okay. So we were talking about forest bathing, and one of the things that I realized that sort of just troubled me a little bit was that idea that we already talked about. But the other thing that made me think more about it was I just think we need to be mindful about how we absorb this science and all of this new science into our lives, because in the case of forest bathing, it grew out of practices in Japan. And when this research hit the United States, we did what we do best, right? We make it into an industry. And I think there's this really slender line that we need to walk. Forest bathing therapists who I learn a lot from and are doing beautiful work. But I've heard this line that the forest is a therapist. And I thought, okay, I want to be careful there. We know that walking in the forest is therapeutic. It's therapeutic, but I don't want to make the forest a therapist. That's a thin line between reciprocity, the reciprocity that this time of ecological crisis asks of us, and commodification, the commodification that got us into this mess in the first place. So I really want to decommodify our language and sense of walking in the world. And so there's a chapter called Immerse where I discuss forest bathing, and I talk about an important article about it that appeared in the Atlantic, where the writer mentioned that the forest bathing guide had already tackled the hard part of finding a trail with minimal elevation gain and limited poison oak along its flanks. Okay. True. The goal of the forest bath is inner peace, holistic health, and mindfulness through time in nature, not an actual wilderness experience. But I wonder if one can have the former truly in all its depth and breadth without the latter. The fruitful empathy of the fretful, complex wild must be allowed to touch us. I think of the stinging nettles that so often brush my hands as a reminder of the woodland's beyond human aliveness and my own need for attentiveness, as effective as a meditation bell. I think of the words from Benedicto by Edward Abbey, which my sister read at my wedding and I copied into my daughter's graduation card. May all your trails be crooked. And I think again of the rattlesnake I almost stepped on. That's another story in the book. My pumping blood, my fear and adrenaline spike, my giddy laughter when I realized I was safe, my brightened awareness of all the footsteps that followed, my visceral intimacy with the land and all that is on, above, and below it, including the snake who didn't want to bite me any more than I wanted to be bitten. Both of us standing so close together in this brisk, uneasy calculus of the wild. My wish for all of us is forest baths guided by our inner knowing, where we don't have any idea what is behind each turn. Immersed, unsettled forest baths, ones where we emerge with ankles enlivened by the prick of nettles, lichens in our tresses, pebbles in our pockets, and uncertainty about whether the tendrily growth on our arms is hair or fur. Our heart rate calm, yet beautifully feral. Let us return so mingled with the stuff of the earth that the first person to stumble upon us after we are home from our wandering looks at us and says, with a mixture of admonition, admiration, worry, and an urge to suddenly run out the door themselves, you need a bath.
It's wonderful. So that's forest bathing, and your complicated response to that is set you off on the path of this book. That's interesting. For folks that haven't, I mean, got the book, and you probably haven't because it's one day old. I was going to just describe the structure of the book is a series of I don't know what to call them exactly, but it's broken up into multiple sections. And to my reading of it so far, each of those sections is maybe an activity. I'll just keep it simple for now. Maybe an activity to get towards rootedness, to, a personal sense of connection with the natural world, with the planet that we live on.
Right.
And so it's almost like a workbook in some ways. When I read the description, I almost pictured, before I got the book, I pictured it could be like a workbook that you go through. Exercise 1, exercise 2. So I made a list of some of these. Oh, and San Francisco Chronicle in a glowing book review of the Rooted called them imperatives, which a word that we both like a lot. So
yeah, I thought, where was this man when we were trying to figure out what these were called? I thought that was a beautiful word.
Yeah, so you're laying out essentially like exercises or imperatives that any reader can take on and practice to increase rootedness. And so some of them that I wrote down are called listen, another section called shed, immerse, relate, unsee, create, and the last one, which I'm really excited when I get there, spiral. And maybe you talked about forest bathing there as one topic, but that also reminded me of the section shed. Maybe you could share with the audience, because I think it's so interesting. What is the shed section or shed imperative about?
Sure. Right. It's so, I love that idea of, I'm going to sort of come around that.
That's what you keep doing. That's what you keep doing.
It's non-linear. That's the book ends in a chapter called Spiral, so nothing is linear. I had a long discussion with my editor about how far we wanted to go in terms of practical recommendations of what to do to engage with these ideas and these concepts. So shed is really about coming into close contact with the earth via, in this case, I talked about, shedding our shoes and walking barefoot.
Not metaphorically.
Right. And immerse is about, I talk a little bit, I come at it through forest bathing, but it's about, immersion with the natural world. Unsee is about darkness and spending time in a fruitful darkness. And spiral is about the spiral of life. So we're going to come around to death and the interrelatedness of life and death, that essential interrelatedness. My editor really wanted me to put a specific practice at the end of every chapter. And I was reluctant to do that. I didn't want to do it, do this, here's a recipe, go take off your shoes and stand for 10 minutes and take 10 deep breaths or whatever. I really resisted doing that. Although I do have usually a practical invitation at the end of every section. Yes. And so that is the word that I'm going for is invitation. So my degrees were in philosophy. I can't help it. I explore things with language. I try to take science, really good hard science, and make it beautiful with literary language and storytelling. And so each of these chapters and imperatives, instead of suggesting a specific thing that everyone do, is more of an invitation to sort of wander into these ideas and say, okay, here's what I did, and here are some ways to think about each of these ideas or concepts. And what do you want to do now? Take that and go go on your path and find what it means for you.
Yeah.
So I have some examples, but I think of them more as invitations than specific practices, though there is an offering of those as well. So shed is that idea that, well, again, it goes to a trend, the earthing trend. So one day I was walking in my woods near my home. There's a park down the road from me, and I kicked my shoes off to walk on this side path that has lots of fir needles on it. You know how it is in the Pacific Northwest where we are. If we get off the main trails, it's really soft and inviting. So, and I go barefoot somewhat frequently, so the pads of my feet are not super soft anymore.
Cloven.
Yeah, I call my
What'd you call
a
it?
cloven hoofed beast.
Yes.
On the top, they're really cute and pretty, and on the bottom, they're like more like a cloven hoofed beast. And they say our cells are supposed to renew every 30 days or something, but that doesn't seem to be working out for the bottom of my feet. Anyway, I was walking in the park one day and I came upon this woman, past her, and she was barefoot as well. And I said, she seemed really serene, so I should have just probably been silent. But I said, "Oh, happy barefoot walking." And she just said, just all ethereal, she said, "I'm earthing." I thought, earthing? Wow. I remembered that word from a trend. I thought, well, that sounds, well, then I'm earthing too. You know? So I went home and I looked it up, and I realized it came from this, was decade or more old research that indicated that suggests that, in a nutshell, the human body has an overall positive ionic charge. There's one of the people that was one of the initial earthing researchers is an electrician. So the human body has a positive ionic charge and the earth has a negative ionic charge. And since we're separated from the earth by shoes all the time that are non-conductive, we are improperly balanced in terms of our ions. And so we go barefoot, called earthing, balances us out. And I have to tell you, Christian, I am a barefoot wanderer. I wanted that to be true. It sounded great. I thought, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Yeah. And so I read all the papers on it, and they have a book, and I tried to make it true, but I talked to physicists and geologists and electricians and read all the stuff, and
not quite.
It's just not there. It just didn't congeal. But if we look at what biomechanists tell us, people that study the movement of the body, that is another beautiful angle that does hold up scientifically to come at walking barefoot from. So we have all these little tendons and metatarsals and tarsals that are overprotected all the time. You know, the beautiful nerves on the bottom of our feet have blindfolds on them with shoes on all the time. So if we can, I'm not talking about, you know, hopping on a bus and going to our downtown job and leaving our shoes at home, or climbing a mountain with a backpack on our back or something with that, where our feet really do need protection. But just that idea of taking away that layer of separation and just being in direct contact, and the information that can bring to our minds and our creativity and the intelligence that it can bring to our body is so magnificent.
I think it's time for another reading, because I know that right from the book, we're pretty good on time, but another invitation in the book that really caught my eye flipping through in the last 24 hours was called Alone, the Essential Complexity of Solitude. I really liked that one, really caught my eye. So did Wander, a feral cartography, because I love to wander and I love to, I've got hermit tendencies. Probably why we're such good friends, because we share some of these traits. But can you tell me, or maybe you have a reading from the Alone invitation?
Yeah, one of the things that I explore in that chapter, and I don't know if this is your experience, but in our dominant culture, we don't encourage times of intentional solitude, as so many other traditions have across time and space. So we have to carve it out. And yet, I don't know about you, but I look forward to my periods of solitude. And if they are extended, I usually fall into a lapse where I start feeling really anxious and my head starts kind of spinning around, and all of those distractions of everyday life fall away, and then you're just left with your poor little brain. And sometimes it gets really hard. Do you have that? Yeah.
When I'm don't have that solitude
Or
time.
When you do have it, do you like after a certain period of kind of going, oh, thank goodness I'm alone for an extended period of time? Do you ever get that, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Kind of
yeah, for sure. I mean, this whole last year has been a year of solitude, so there's been that feeling coming up.
Yeah. I think it's really common for us to crave solitude, and then when we have it, we find that that's harder than we thought sometimes. And then after a period of solitude comes to a close, we realize the essential lessons that we learned during that time. All I'm saying is I usually go through a period of anxiety that I have to pass through and come to the other side of when I take times of intentional solitude. So I think that's important, and I think it's part of the lesson of solitude in nature. So I wrote a little bit about that because I just want to encourage people to know that there's space for all kinds of experience in solitude. I think it's easier for introverts I'm a card-carrying introvert. I think you probably would identify that way. It's easier for introverts to want to seek solitude, but I think that just as it's important for us to go to parties sometimes as introverts, I think for everyone, no matter how you, if you're identify more as an extrovert or get your energy from people, it's still really important to take that time away. And it invites us to connect to the natural world with a feeling of at-homeness that isn't always peaceful, but is meaningful. So I talk about in this story a time where I was camping by myself, and I want to shout out briefly to the illustrator of this book.
Yeah, I was wondering where this beautiful art came from. She hold that up.
So this is the art for Solitude, where the chapter is called Alone. Some beautiful, and she did the cover as well.
Moose.
So this is Helen Nicholson. She's a young woman in Brighton in the UK.
Who's Wander?
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, the little fox. Or coyote.
That one's a fox. Oh no, that's coyote. You're right.
Yes.
Let's get our canines straight here. All right. So I was talking about how I was on a trip by myself, and I was kind of losing it a little bit. And sometimes we need to talk ourselves down. While
you read, I'm going to check the chat and see if folks have questions for Lyanda. We'll be coming around to those shortly, so you can put them right in the chat, and I will take note of that.
Okay, perfect. So I was losing it a little bit, and I was starting to worry about myself, and I'm way out with a tent by myself, just like in the beautiful illustration that Helen created. Once a wolf prowled the edges of my camp for days. I had set up in the westernmost region that gray wolves have wandered into since the beginning of their Washington State recovery in the Teanaway. There were 3 in the area, rarely spotted. I longed to see one, but knew that my chances were infinitesimal. So what was this lupine visitor? I couldn't quite see him, yet he wouldn't leave. Be still, my mind whispered, then screamed, he does not exist. Until finally, I did become still, accepting near glimpses, expecting no more. I watched the stars that night and slept and dreamed. The next morning, I woke to tracks around the fire ring and an oval depression where a creature had curled at the bottom of my bed, a shimmer with gold, gray, brown, black fur. Was this a dream? No. Would anyone else be able to see the fur? I don't know. I remember Walt Whitman's invocation in Leaves of Grass. Give me solitude, give me nature, give me again, oh nature, your primal sanities. I remember Emily Dickinson's divine insanity, both capitalized, divine insanity, also founded in observation of nature. Societally condoned sanity is not the only nor the highest sort.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah. I wonder if I could see the fur.
I wonder if you could see the fur. I bet you could.
Well, I really like. I really like the. There's several of these invitations, but the alone one about spending time alone, the wander one, which I haven't got to read, but I'm assuming it's get off the beaten path and follow where your senses and imagination take you sometimes.
Exactly. We, as modern people, we rarely leave the house without knowing exactly where we're going to go.
Yeah.
And the way that we're going to get wherever we're going to go is mapped out because our streets are on grids and our sidewalks and even our mountain trails. We know we're going to hike to that lake and then we're going to hike back down. And I'm not suggesting that people wander off in the woods with no map and compass.
Or shoes.
Or shoes. Yeah. Not that bad. But I am suggesting that sometimes it is nice to leave the house or step onto a trail and allow ourselves the experience of just following, that inner voice that says, where do I go next? Where do I go next? I tell a story in here about how I woke up early one morning and I saw this young female coyote that's been hanging out in our neighborhood. She disappeared around a corner and I thought, I wonder where she's going. And I thought, you don't want to pester the urban coyotes or follow too closely. And she always just disappears. And I started walking. And every time I came to a corner, I saw her turn one corner and then I lost her completely. But I thought, I wonder where she'd go from here. Down this alley? And I'd walk down the alley and come to the end of it. I thought, where from here? And so I kept asking myself that question. And I ended up in this community garden with a spiral stone labyrinth in the middle of it, of all things, that I never had. In 16 years of living in that neighborhood, I never knew that that garden was there. And I was also lost. I wasn't positive how to get home. And I laughed at myself because here I was sort of caught up and looped up in my own preaching and ended up lost in my own neighborhood. But I think there's some wonderful science. John O'Keefe in 2014 won the Nobel Prize in medicine for locating location grid neurons in the human hippocampus. And he said that these are entwined with our experience of memory. And so these neurons, these location grid neurons in modern humans are really flabby and underutilized. We have Siri, we have the road, the map, we have our plan. But if we can,
how many steps you took per day?
Oh yeah,
everything. Yeah.
To walk twice more around this block.
Yeah.
All of those things, all of our footsteps are commodified, our routes are planned. And so when we allow ourselves that to respond to that invitation, to just kind of go, I'm going out the door and I'm not sure where I'm going.
It's lovely.
It's a way, it's another form of beautiful human intelligence.
Oh, that's lovely. And I love to wander also. And we've talked about a couple of specific invitations or sections in your book, and one theme that I'm hearing you as you're explaining them to me, like a recurring theme, actually matches up with this line this sentence I underlined that I want to read from your intro at the beginning in the Frog Church. It said, when we walk mindfully in the natural world, attuned to the voices of the birds, the alternate unfurling and dormancy of plant life through the seasons, the tracks of the coyotes who wander from the green space to our urban backyard, a great deal of truth about the interrelationship between humans, plants, animals, and the land is directly revealed to us. This attunement is our most authentic, most innate way of learning and knowing. And I had to underline that because it's so powerful. And as you've been describing these invitations, what I'm hearing, what ties a lot of them together is we already know this stuff, or we did. And it seems like you're trying to like help people strengthen a lost muscle or hear a voice that's been dimmed inside us. And so it's seems like a lot of this book is showing the reader that you already knew this, or you know it in your genes and your cells. And I guess that gets back to where we started with, like, science is showing, well, look, science is proving this now, showing it to us, in that language, but there's a direct reveal from the land.
Right. I hope that this will.
It's really beautiful to me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that this book serves as an invitation for people to have confidence in that innate knowing. At the same time, I think that people apprehend everything in information, and we take it in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't want to, I think one of the things that this science offers, and why it's such an important grounding part of this book, is there are a lot of people for whom it doesn't come naturally to speak in that language or to be open in that way. And yet when they read the new science, they kind of go, oh, there's language for that thing I've always had this inkling about, but wasn't confident enough to speak, or didn't I'm distracted. We have band-tailed pigeons flying around. They're so pretty. So my husband always complains that I don't finish a sentence when we're outdoors because that's a hummingbird. So I think that, coming back around to that subtitle, Science, Nature, and Spirit, for many people, I think the science can be very affirming. I'm not trying to set different ways of knowing over and above one another, but to show, like, the pancakes, how they are all smushed together. And
pancakes.
The vegan pancakes.
Sorry.
Blue Planet jokes. I think that these ways of knowing interweave really beautifully, but I do hope that this book can offer people some confidence in that sense of, oh, I did already know that.
Yeah.
Oh, I can be at home in this wild place, that is our earthen home.
Mm-hmm.
And that connection that I feel, that whisper of connection that I feel, that's real, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And this science mirrors and echoes it, but it doesn't discover it. It affirms a way of knowing that is innate. And it does offer things that we didn't know. It does give us physiological details of, where things occur in our brain, what part of the nervous system is activated in nature. And all of that, I think that detail is stuff that we can't intuit, or we do need science to figure out that certain kind of specificity. And there's a poetry to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And with all this said, giving people maybe permission, or maybe science gives folks more of a sense of permission to walk barefoot. Like, oh, it's not totally kooky. That reminds me of one of our what are these called? Tenets of rootedness.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is eccentricity. To live rooted on a changing earth is to create a new story. There are very few voices left that speak for wild nature first. It's time to clasp hands, paws, fins, feathers, branches, and know where we stand. The way of this story will not appear conventional within outworn cultural norms. Our new ways are disruptive. They will look weird. This is good. Let us not care. but enjoy that glimpse in another's eye that we will find sometimes, the one that says,
You're not crazy. I feel it too.
Wonderful. I'm going to check the chat here. I see a couple questions rolling in.
Thank you for reading that. I want to say it's unusual to have your words read to you and for you. And I appreciate it. It was
Yeah.
nice. Thank you.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones. Is it's okay. It might get kind of weird, and that's okay.
That's okay. It's good.
Yes.
It's what it's all about.
Neva earlier just made a comment about breathing fresh air increases oxygen, but it also increases our serotonin, which of course alters our mood and maybe our spirit. Love that you write about this.
Thank you. Yes. Breathing, as basic a thing as the in-breath and out-breath. And one of the things I write about in this book, you noted, Christian, that there's a chapter called Create. I love that the word create, as in creativity, and creature, that we are, is the same root. That means to bring forth, to bring forth. And this, Maeve, did you say?
I believe it's Neva.
Neva, beautiful name. The word that we associate with creativity is inspiration. And that was actually your very first question, what inspired you to write this book? And I love, being a word nerd, that the word inspiration is the same as respire, right? It's breathing in and breathing out. Inspiration and respiration. The breathing in and breathing out is our creative source. Yeah. So that's what I think that comment speaks to.
Yes. I don't know what he's referring to, but Bob Pyle chimes in. Nice moment there, kids.
Thank you, Bob.
Michael Wolf asked a question. He said, thanks for this great conversation. This is not a simple question. What is the primary question that we need to continually ask ourselves to move forward? Coming from Michael Wolf.
Yeah, that goes back, I think, to that idea of decommodifying our relationship with the natural world. When we look at the natural world, I think it's beautiful that we are learning and remembering that our bodies and our minds are healthier in the natural world, and now we have all this rafts of research. But if we walk into nature or the wilderness, and when I say wilderness, I mean, the forest wilderness, the desert wilderness,
Bramble
the ocean,
patch.
anything, the wildness. If our question is, what's it going to do for me? Then we're going nowhere. Like, if I take this path, will I feel better? Will my mental health be better? Yes, and that's lovely. But the question is not what will wildness do for me, but how do I live? How do I live? I think that's the question. Knowing what we know, living in this time, how do we live? And this book is an invitation to wander in that question. And it gives us some concepts to explore as we find our own answer, because I do not think that there's one way. We all have different gifts. We have different talents. We have different ways of being in the world that we can bring. And I agree that's not a simple question, but I think that's the question. That's the question.
Yeah, wonderful. Elizabeth asks, well, first I'm going to go here to Ellen, more of a comment, but Ellen writes, this all resonates. Thank you. Wish we could all be sitting out on the porch for this conversation. Ellen plans to go to Village Books and purchase your book. She heard your interview on the radio the other day and wrote down the name of the book. Important work. And that's nice from Ellen. And Elizabeth asks, do you have a favorite of the books you have written?
Oh.
I know.
Yeah, I do.
You do?
Yeah, and no one will know this book because it's my least selling book, and it's got this cumbersome title. It's called Pilgrim on the Great Bird Continent. I don't even know if I can remember the title. The Importance of everything and other lessons from Darwin's Lost Notebooks. That and it explores.
Talk about subtitle.
I know.
Mhm.
Where was the committee on that one? So very cumbersome, most unfortunate. But I loved that book. I looked into Darwin's own evolution as a naturalist and found this deeply human story. And that speaks to actually many of the concepts in this book, to find that the theory of natural selection came from this deep sense of wonder in nature, and to explore that dimension of the story and Darwin's story was a surprise and a pleasure to write. And I love that book. And
Can you say the full title again for our audience?
How long do we have? It's called Pilgrim on the Great Bird Continent. And I think it's probably just available on demand or somewhere out there in the ether.
They're starting to go by
I like
crazy
all my
here.
books though. I will say that, it's really hard. I mean, we're all creators of things and we have this anxiety about bringing stuff to the world. And then once you do, I don't know, you made it and you love them for what they are.
Excuse me here for getting distracted. Kim also wishes she was on the porch with us. She's enjoying watching the hummingbirds visit the feeder back there. And she feels like your new book is being released at the perfect time as we begin to heal from such a difficult period. And then she has a question. What will you write about next?
Okay. Kim.
Yes. From NCI.
Kim. Thank you, Kim. I wish everyone was on the porch with us, honestly. And I want to say that when I knew that Christian and I were going to do this, and then I needed to come to Bellingham to sign books, I emailed Christian and I said, let's be in the same place. Zoom is already so fragmenting in a way, a platform, and we're grateful for it, that it brings us together, but we know that there's something lost. And I thought if we could have this kind of just us at least be together, it would be more fun for everyone. So yes, I wish everyone was on the porch with us, and maybe next time.
Yeah.
But I'm glad we're here together. As far as what I am going to write about next, I have to say I don't know. And that is usually what I would say at this point is I know, but I'm not going to tell you right now because I'm superstitious and secretive that way, and I keep things to myself for a long time.
Yeah.
But I honestly don't know right now. I think the pandemic time has thrown us all a little bit.
Yeah.
And it was hard to bring, I'm not going to lie, it was hard to bring a book to fruition during that confounding period. And I don't have the next thing figured out. I'm writing in my diary. But wheels are spinning, and there will be more creation, to be sure. And Kim, to your point, there's no way I could have known when I started writing this book that it would that I would be finishing it during a pandemic, or that it would come out at this moment where we are all reemerging. So I don't want to call it lucky or anything, but I think that the timing is right in that it's a call to remember our connection. It's a call to remembrance and reconnection. So it is I mean, I couldn't have foreseen this, but I think it is the right moment for the book to come out.
There's a related question from Rachel or Rochelle related to the pandemic and this book, but how did the pandemic affect your writing of this book and or your perceptions that went into the writing?
I thought about it a lot when I was writing it. I didn't want to timestamp this book by making it about the pandemic. I did note over and over again that I was writing in a time of crisis. And I did point out that one of the aspects of that crisis was that we were in a global pandemic, civil unrest like we have never seen, and ecological crisis. So for me, it's sort of folded into a big picture of earth that is asking something of us. But I didn't write a lot specifically about the pandemic because sorry, wiggle our table too much. Because I didn't want to limit, the time, frame that I wanted it to remain universal
Was it
while still
different?
acknowledging it.
Was it different? Just, I mean, you're more or less a full-time writer, so maybe being like stuck home for a year maybe wasn't that different than normal book writing time.
It was actually,
Did it?
well, my husband Tom, who was home all the time. And so that was weird for me because usually I'm, wandering around the house, talking to myself and
Yes.
taking my pen outside and lying down in the grass or whatever. And I don't look like I'm working, but I really am. Things are happening. And I was really self-conscious about that because Tom would be in there on his computer. And I thought, I don't look like I'm working like he does. And so it changed the whole process. But it seems true that it would be really similar to how it usually is, but it wasn't.
Some people have working from home and they're enjoying it, but they have the cats climbing all over them, especially like right at the moment of the Zoom call comes on. That's when my cat starts yelling at me. So was Tom sort of like the cat?
I feel like I was more like the cat. Like, there was this person in my house and I think it was okay to sneak up and say, honey, I had this great idea, and he just give me the
posting rings.
And then we did get a kitten. So we had one another and the kitten.
Yeah.
And our old cat.
And there's a comment in here from Sabrina. Glad to hear Carmen is still around. Still with you.
Thank you, Sabrina. So we live with a starling in our home. She was a rescue bird when she was 5 days old, and she just turned 7 years old. She turned 7 years old on May 1st.
Carmen did?
Yes.
Oh.
And about 3 weeks ago, Sabrina, I found her on the floor of her aviary, which isn't that uncommon during the nesting season. She likes to hide under the newspapers at the bottom end, so I didn't think that much of it. But then I noticed that she wasn't moving, and I picked her up, and her foot, one of her feet was crumbled and green and cold. And I thought, and she was shivering, and I thought she was going to die. I mean, birds, she's a passerine, a songbird. They're very ephemeral, and she's already old. But I did some heroic nursing, and Carmen seemed determined on working on healing her foot, and she's fine now. So it was close there for a minute. I'm not sure that I would have been able to. If you'd asked me that day, I thought I thought this would be the time where I had to let everyone know that Carmen had passed, but nope.
Luckily not.
No, she's with us.
We're gonna get to wrapping up here, folks, shortly. Neva did put in another question. I don't think I have time to read it all, but she's has curiosity about trees communicating through fungus and underestimating the intelligence of trees. So that's a great topic, Neva, and right in here.
There's a chapter.
There's a chapter about the intelligence of trees, which is one of the areas it seems like the science is so fascinating.
The science is taking
That's coming
off.
out, yeah.
And
right here in the Northwest too, not unsurprisingly.
Right. Suzanne Simard, who is she is a big name in that research, but there are many other researchers working in that area as well. But her book came out yesterday, the same day as my book. And there's a book or a chapter called Grow: Trees and the Rings of Belonging. And so I do get into talking about that fungal network, and also that tenet that you brought up, eccentricity, comes out in that chapter a lot, because some of the suggestions that I make for inviting kinship with trees just don't look normal. I talk about reading poetry to trees, or following Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh's admonition to hug trees, and his suggestion that when we hug trees, it's not only beneficial to us, but maybe to the tree as well. And this new science again affirms that.
Mhm.
in
I
that
really
word.
love the suggestion of reading a book to a tree or a poems to a tree. I'm going to start that right up.
I hope it seems once you get going, it doesn't seem very weird. It seems
I love
very
it.
relational.
I love it. One more from Bob Pyle that he's happy to hear Carmen is alive because Mozart Starling is his favorite.
Oh, thank you,
There's
Bob.
quite a few comments here. I'll share with you when we get off, but just lots of thankfulness, lots of people excited to get the book and start reading it after this conversation. There's a couple questions about how to get a signed copy, which are at Village Books right now.
Right.
So you could probably call and get one set aside for you tomorrow, or just get down there in the morning and there's a stack of some signed copies of Rooted. And we're looking at the wrong
we're
thing.
Up there, I know. Sorry, everyone. We
have multiple screens to
each
get
other,
chat.
and we have-
But it's been so wonderful even though we can't see our friends out there, met and unmet, knowing that you're there is generous to spend this last hour with us talking about this book. A reminder that NCI, North Cascades Institute, we'll have another great event next Thursday with Village Books. Saul Weisberg, John Miles, and Bill Dietrich in conversation. And we've already mentioned twice in this episode, but Robert Michael Pyle will be closing out the series 2 Thursdays from now with his collection of essays, Nature Matrix. And more thanks rolling in. Thank you, everyone out there. Anything you want to share, Lyanda, to close?
I am just so delighted that this was the first event for the book, that we could be together. I am filled with gratitude for all of you who showed up tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your presence and your comments. And I stay in touch. I am always happy to hear from readers. And
You have a website?
Yeah, you can get with my name. You can find me anywhere. LyandaLynnHaupt.com, Lyanda Haupt on Instagram, which is my favorite social media platform. So yeah, and
Wonderful.
actually lyandahaupt@gmail.com. You are free to use my email to be in touch.
And if you like this conversation, you have several more online readings over the next couple of weeks. I guess go to the website to get those.
I do, yeah. I have an events page on my website, and and every reading is going to be different. I'll be in conversation with different people, and I'll try to think up something to make it fun and unique.
Excellent.
And thank you guys so much for joining us today. And thank you to our audience as well. There's a question about if this event is recorded. The answer is yes. All of our virtual events are recorded and uploaded to the Village Books YouTube channel. So this one will be uploaded in a few days, probably 3 to 5 days. And I'll send the link now. I've sent it a couple of times, so I'll send it one more time. The link to the YouTube channel, and also the link to the Village Books website where you can buy Rooted if you haven't already. And also Lyanda's other books as well. And did you guys have any closing words at all? Any last words? No? Well, thank you again. As a lovely conversation. I'm so glad to be a part of that and listen to you guys. Just, it sounds like a great book. I think I'm gonna buy a copy for myself. And thank you so much to our audience members for supporting us. You're always a great audience, and we really appreciate it.
Give a shout out to my nieces down in Seattle. If it's not past their bedtime and they didn't tune out to go play video games, I got a couple texts from Madeline, and so all the nieces down there, hi. And to anyone else hidden behind the screen, we're super grateful that you chose to spend some time with us, and see you down the crooked path.
Down the crooked path. Thank you, my friend. Thank you.
And with that, I think I will bid you all good night.
Good night.
Thank you.